and welcome to Viewpoint. I'm Rahim Rahimtullah. I'm joined today by Oleksandr Bogomolov. He's the director at the Institute of Oriental Studies at the National Academy of Sciences of Ukraine. Mr. Bogomolov, many thanks for joining us.
Hello.
You come to speak with us just a few days before the Syrian government is supposed to sit down with the opposition for talks. This could be a key moment in the very long, drawn-out civil war that we've seen in Syria. But as ever, there are tensions with Russia on the one side backing President Assad of Syria, the US on the other side backing various opposition groups. What's your assessment? Do you think this meeting will come to pass?
Actually, I'm quite pessimistic. If even it happens, it will be a very preliminary stage of a very preliminary phase of the beginning of something, because the perspective is very far away. The size, the disagreement, between the parties, and there are multiple parties to this negotiation, it's so huge, and the points of where they could agree is really very much remote, and I'm really very pessimistic. Now they're talking about, the opposition is trying to use this opportunity to try and get some actually really very limited but important humanitarian concessions from the government of Syria, the regime, basically, because the regime hasn't besieged a number of localities and people are just starving, and there is a well-known case of Madaya, which is in the vicinity of Damascus, to the northwest from Damascus. There's already several dozens of people, I guess, dying, and there had been some humanitarian convoys coming recently, back and forth, but there are a lot of other localities in similar dire straits, and the opposition, which now is more or less united, unlike it was the case sometime before, due to the efforts of Saudi Arabia primarily, They try to use this opportunity to try and get some concessions from the regime which were not available to them before. That's the only point.
Do you see this area, this humanitarian assistance, is that a place where the US, where Russia, where Syria can align themselves?
They can, because the interests are so different. Russia's interest is very, to say the least, egotistic, because Russia gets itself involved in this conflict for its own purely individual, let's say, purely national interest, and not really, which has absolutely nothing to do with the interest of any party in the Middle East.
So you definitely,
even the regime itself.
You're not buying this Russian line that they're in there to fight ISIS?
Oh, no, at all, of course. It is a disinformation, and there are English sources who say so, very reliable English sources also, and I would quote, for instance, the Institute for the Study of War, who plainly call this Russian effort propaganda and disinformation. It is really a disinformation because there's a lot of, already many parties have calculated the number of airstrikes that Russia has delivered. Most of the airstrikes focus, like 99%, 90-something percent, they focus in areas specifically controlled by the true opposition, also the democratic opposition, the non-Islamist opposition, the patriotic opposition, so to say, who represent the majority of the Syrian population, because Arab-speaking Sunnis, in the areas in the western Syria, basically western and northern Syria towards the Turkish border.
Because that opposition is rather fractured, and there has been a lot of talk, a lot has been written about the fact that do the West, do the US really know who they're backing? I mean, are these people to be trusted?
There is an enormous effort, actually, to maintain this knowledge, to keep itself there for the Western parties, multiple parties, actually, to keep themselves abreast of what's going on, in fact, And I've seen lists of this opposition that's really huge numbers, because what happened, actually, and this is not something for what Syrians should be blamed, it is the doings of actually, it is what the regime has done to this country, because from the onset, when there was no civil war and there was peaceful protest, the opposition was pretty united. It was really as much as it could be in any country, in fact, I would say. Of course, there were contradictions, there were factions, but these factions and contradictions could be very easily eliminated through a democratic procedure. But then when the Syrian regime has started bombarding its own population, really killing people in mass, and there's a lot of mottos they used, actually. Not all of them have been translated into English and circulated in the English-speaking media. Like, for instance, there is a motto, it is either Assad or nothing. And this is a very speaking motto, actually, the principle, which they followed, what the regime troops used. When they would enter any village, any rebellious village or any locality, they would say, either Assad or nothing. You got this choice.
It's absolutely uncompromising.
Absolutely, yes. We kill all of you, we don't care, for the only reason that the Assad regime persists. In such situation, of course, it was and the bombardment, the killings of the people was so massive. In fact, people felt very insecure, which led to a situation whereby every village had to arm itself, Everyone just had to arm themselves. Every locality, every minor ethnic community or religious community, like, let's say, Christians or Turkmens or whosoever, this country is not really mono-ethnic, and monocultural. Everyone had to, Kurds, not to be forgotten, of course, they all had to somehow arm themselves, And then now we have alliances, built upon alliances, and of course we have a great challenger who came in from elsewhere, from Iraq, which is the Islamic State, who is actually a challenger equally to the regime and also to the true opposition, the patriotic opposition, also even to the moderate Islamist opposition in a way.
It's just turning back for a moment to the Russian position on this. Now, I've read recently that actually Russia's airstrike campaign over the last 3 months has actually been quite effective, and the Assad regime has gained territory and now finds itself in a fairly strong position. Do you believe that is going to affect any potential negotiations?
It is really very effective, and there have been calculations about how far they really went with the regime. They did really a great number of airstrikes, but had no operation of their own on the ground. Despite they brought the troops, they brought the Spetsnaz. They have some troops, on the ground, but they did nothing much about the ground operation themselves. The Assad troops are really in a very bad shape already. The strongest part of this side of the equation, I mean the one who props up the regime, is not the regime troops itself, but Hezbollah, which is a paramilitary organization, which is also on the list of terrorist organizations, and it's a Shia paramilitary proxy of Iran, based in Lebanon, Okay, this is the strongest part of it. So Russia has effectively got itself involved into a very peculiar, strange, I would say, and not really shaky alliance, in fact, with Hezbollah and Iranian proxies, Iranians themselves, there on the ground, and they didn't really go very far in terms of gaining ground, What Russia has succeeded to do, in fact, because the regime was about to fall. That was the second time in the history of the civil conflict. The first time in 2012, when the regime was propped up by Iranians who brought in Hezbollah, okay? And also it was delivered a huge support internationally by Russia at various international forums, okay, where Russia blocked interference, international interference, humanitarian interference, basically, in this crisis, okay? And this is the second time. The second time was right on the eve of Russia's interference with this conflict, military interference with this conflict, when the regime was about to fall. The complete province of Idlib was already overrun by the rebels, okay? It's not the only locality. Even parts of the stronghold of the Assad regime, the Latakia provinces, were overrun by the rebels, okay? The south was pretty much freed from the government forces. And, of course, there is also the Islamic State on the east, There were only spots still controlled, of course, importantly, the capital city, but the regime was already was in a very shaky position, and importantly, it ran out of resources, the military resources, the aircraft, and Russia comes in. But what they gained was up to 4% more of territory, In fact, they didn't really, it wasn't a huge success and still isn't, The only success is that the regime is still there. It's still a party. Otherwise, it wouldn't be there at all. That's the only thing. And this is also an ace in Russia's hands, because they really got Bashar in their pocket. At least for the moment. They really can do anything with him. And the evidence for that is the agreement which they themselves, the Russians, made themselves public. The agreement that they signed between the militaries, underwritten by the defense minister of both countries. Which allows the freedom of movement for the Russians, an enormous freedom of movement, and also the whole liability the regime takes upon itself. It's an absolutely amazing, incredible agreement that they have reached, which is a witness, which attests to two things: that a regime is absolutely almost non-existent and meaningless politically, and it is almost totally in Russia's pocket, right at the moment, at least. Of course, there is Iranians, there is an Iranian side to it, but this is how it looks like.
Mr. Bogomolov, I'm afraid that is where we have to leave. We are out of time. No doubt, it is a situation we will have to continue to monitor. Many thanks for coming to speak with us.
Welcome.
You've been watching Viewpoint. I've been joined by Oleksandr Bogomolov, the director of the Institute of Oriental Studies at the National Academy of Sciences of Ukraine. Many thanks for watching. Do join us again.